it is. Now we're good. All right. Good morning, Jim. How we doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you
All
doing?
right. I'm doing awesome.
Good, good.
Looking forward to this. I had a busy morning because my poor dog, man, she gets these big, like cauliflower ear, like a wrestler does,
Okay.
because she shakes her head so much. And once again, she's got this big blood thing, and I had to run her to the doctor and
Oh
get back
man.
here in time for podcasting. So she's going into surgery to have cauliflower ear done for like the
Oh
third.
man.
Of course, my dog would have cauliflower ear, uh, you know, but poor little thing. It kind of sucks, but
Yes, for sure.
all right. But we're looking forward to this today. I'm telling you that we're gonna have some good talks. So I'm gonna introduce you a little bit, and then and your last name is Hetherington. Is that correct? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yep, yep. Just the way it sounds. Hetherington.
Hetherington. And I was like, wait a second. When I was looking at your stuff last night, I've only met you as Jim, right? So,
That's right. Yeah.
and then of course I think we had breakfast and everything together at the business book camp, right? You and your
Yeah.
wife. We got to sit together with your wife. It was awesome. We had a
Yeah.
good time out there. Is that where you live? Do you live out there in New
No,
Jersey
I
or where?
no, I'm up in Canada. I live about an hour west of Toronto, Ontario.
Oh, that's why you're traipsing in the freaking
That's
snow.
why I'm in the snow. That's right.
That's why your wife has that little slight Canadian accent. I
Does
remember
she?
hearing it. There's a couple words that she said that caught my ear. Isn't that funny? In my Heartland, that is filmed out in Canada. It's that big horse show.
Right.
I love that freaking show.
Yeah.
And Canada looks so nice from there, wherever they're filming it at. So
Yeah. I'm not sure. I think that's out in the West Coast. So British Columbia, that area. I think. I'm
yeah.
not sure.
I've been to Canada once or twice, but it was only kind of driving. This is before you had to have a passport or whatever. You can
Right.
just pop back and forth if you're an
Yeah.
American
Yeah.
citizen. And I'll never forget that. I'm like, wow, man, their gas is so freaking cheap, because I didn't really realize this by the liter, not
That's
the
right.
gallon, right? And I was like, what the heck did I just fill up?
I know.
And so I'll never forget that story. I was like, oh my goodness, man, I really screwed myself on this, thinking I'm saving all kinds of money, and that's so far from the truth. It wasn't even funny.
Yeah.
So
No, we certainly get the better deal when we cross over and buy your gas.
yeah. All right. Well, let me introduce you, Jim. Okay. Jim's a relationship expert committed to empowering individuals and partners to create next level success in marriage and business. Jim has been married for 39 years and has been a mentor for 30 years. He is also an entrepreneur and business owner for the past 26 years and was a pastor for 23 years. So it's safe to say he's uniquely qualified to address and speak on any areas of relationships. Invitations have been extended to Jim to speak nationally, internationally. He is a 5-time author. Major networks like NBC, ABC, and Fox have featured him. And a fun fact about Jim is that his first marathon when he turned 60 years young. Huh. How old are you now?
I'm 62. Yeah, so
So we're close, huh?
yeah.
I'll be 62 in March.
Oh, is that right? I'm
Yeah.
63 in June.
So yeah, I saw that you ran a marathon. I tell everybody, I said, that's why I learned how to fight, so I don't have to run.
Maybe that's what's wrong.
The marathon, that's just one of the things I always wanted to do. My son, I don't know if I told you the story about my son. He's a runner.
Yeah.
He probably runs anywhere from 3 to 7, 8 miles a day. You know what I mean? My middle son,
Okay.
he was made fun of, heavy set kid, fat kid in high school. And he just, I don't know, out of high school, man, he would smoke anybody now, right? He went and, I don't know, a few years ago, right before COVID, he said, hey, Dad, I'm going to go do this marathon, this 5K or whatever this thing is. And it's through Universal Studios here in California. It's the first one he's ever did. And so I said, okay, son. And we're kind of tracking him, right? And I'm like, wait a second, is he already coming around the freaking bin or what? And he was in the first 10 ever out of 1,500 people.
Wow.
In that. And I was like, wow, man. I told him, I said, I can't believe, he lost 105 pounds himself and
Wow.
Ran that marathon. And it's, he's Running, I don't know about you. Do you like to run or not? Is that something that you do?
Well, going through high school, I was a sprinter. I never ran anything more than 400-meter relays. That was
Mm.
the longest I did. But I've always loved the idea of running. And it was the same idea when I was 58, 59. I thought, what can I do when I'm 60? And I met a friend of mine, he's run 6 marathons, and we started talking. And I said to him, I've always wanted to run a marathon. He says, why don't you? And I said, well, I got a bad knee. I got a bad back. I'm almost 60 years old, and he looked at me, he says, Jim, I've seen people cross the finish line in wheelchairs. I've seen them on crutches. I've seen them with one leg. I said, you're trying to tell me I got no excuse? He says, you've got no excuse. So that's when I started training to run. And then I did. I fell in love with it. So now, Sundays I'll go out and I'll run 10, 12 kilometers just to kind of wind up the week, just to keep it up. And then I did my first marathon at 60, and then 61, I did an ultra marathon, which is a minimum of 50 kilometers. So I did that the following year. I don't think I'll go any more than that, but it was fun.
That's good. Well, I would say that Israel's on, by the way. He says hi to us.
Hey, Israel. Awesome. Good to hear. Good
He's a cool
stuff.
cat, isn't he? We had a lot of fun
He's
with
a
him.
great guy. Yes.
Yeah.
No, he's fantastic.
So so you're, we're kind of the same age. So has physical fitness been part of what your regimen is all the time?
It has been. Yeah. There was a period about 15 years ago where I was really busy in business, busy in ministry, busy in life. And I was putting all my exercising and conditioning and stuff off to the side. I had always been into weight training and, always kept my cardio up the whole 9 yards. And then I got away from it. And 15 years ago, I almost died because I put all of that stuff aside and I was just focused on business and, just trying to survive. And then it took me 2 years to get my life back in order. And now it's the first 2 hours of every day of my life. I spend, stretching, working out, and that's where I start my day.
So when you say that you almost something happened, what was your experience?
So
Mine was blood clots.
Oh, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
No, mine was complete disconnection. I was ready to go to yet another meeting, and I loaded up my car. I was ready to drive out of the driveway. I had the car started. I was all strapped in, and I went to pull the car in gear. My body just said, we're not doing that. And I sat in my car for 20 minutes. I could not pull it in gear. I could not do a thing. And then finally, after 20 minutes, I shut the car off and went inside, told him I wasn't going to be there at the meeting. And from there, I had to step out of leadership. I almost lost my business. And for the next 6 months, I was just an emotional, physical, mental wreck. I just completely burnt out and fried. And that was the end of it. And so it was a new journey for me to start looking after myself in a whole new way.
Isn't that, don't you wish that we had these epiphanies when we were young?
Oh man, or at least some alarms but there was no warning. I was working 70, 80 hours in my business. I ran a renovation construction company. I was in ministry serving 20, 24 hours a week in my spare time. And, I was just going and going. And then all of a sudden there was just this click. And so that's why I tell people, look, we're one step, we're one meeting, we're one instant away from brokenness, from broken relationships, whatever. It's like the old expression goes, relationships don't break overnight. They take, it's over time that they break. And same with our physical bodies. It's not necessarily overnight that they break. It's just what we do with them. It's like I tell people all the time, you eat and drink. You're not eating and drinking for today. You're eating and drinking for 20 and 30 years from today. And so it's the long term that we have to look at, and it creeps up on us.
Yeah, it's so mine was I had traveled and I was doing some stuff that I shouldn't have been. I was shooting some testosterone and I was going and teaching the military and all that kind of stuff. Jason's online saying hi. Do you know Jason Flame or not?
I don't recognize the name. No, I don't think I do. But
he's a black belt of mine. He's got a great podcast, by the way.
Amazing.
Jay, if you're still on there, you should reach out to Jim. He'd be a good. You'd be really good on his platform too. He's a good dude.
Absolutely, I love it.
I've known him since he's a kid. He's been one of my students forever.
Wow,
he's a good man.
Good stuff.
So anyway, so when I went this last time I went, I was taught the first half, and the military allowed me to take this course which civilians can't take, right? And I said, okay, I'll take the course and I'll teach the gun part on the second half of the day. But every day I was so tired, man, and that I was just miserable that trip. And when I went home, I told my son, I said, hey, I feel like I cracked my rib in the house or something. We were doing, gun simulations and fighting in the house. I said, I think I cracked a rib. Went to the doctor and I had shortness of breath, and they said, hey, let's take a look at, your heart. It wasn't that. They took me to PET scan and said I had 2 blood clots in my lungs.
Wow.
And it didn't help that I shot testosterone. I didn't know any of this stuff, that testosterone thickens your blood. And it started, my blood clot started in my legs from an injury. And, I don't know why God kept me around. That could have been a death sentence for me, but
Sure.
I was the same as you, Jim. I don't know, for 6 months I was miserable. It's good that you talk about that, right? Because 6 months I was pretty wrecked, and you can see some other pictures of me back in the time. I was so overweight and unhealthy looking at that time, but every time something happened, I don't know if you were like this. Every time something kind of like felt weird or off, I'm like, oh man, I'm going to stroke, man. God's going to stroke me out here or something. I remember telling God all the time, hey, listen, just take me home. Don't stroke me out and put me on life support or some garbage like that. Just take it. Just take me home. And it took me a good 6 months too, just like that, for me to finally say, okay, I'm going to change this, and I got to stop living like this. And if I do, I had to move forward. And so I don't know if you hear a lot of those stories as a coach, counselor, or what, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
these life things that change.
Yeah, it's the whole idea of, we just think we're indestructible, don't we? We just have that mentality, right? We get it from when we're teens, we carry it into our 20s and 30s, and we continue to grow. But yeah, it's just that indestructible mentality. And for me, it was, just exactly that. I thought I could work all the hours, and I'll tell you, it was nothing for me to work around the clock. Like, I would work 24 hours and then maybe sleep for a few hours and then go again. So it was nothing to do that. And so, I'll tell people all the time, just because you can eat 2 or 3 quarter pounders doesn't mean you should, right? Right? Just because I can stay up for 2 days straight and work doesn't mean I should, because eventually it's going to catch up. But it's just that indestructible mentality, I think, that does need to shift. And we can ignore so many things. We ignore different parts of our, different elements in our life. Right? Because if we're just working, which I was ignoring the physical. I was ignoring the spiritual. I was ignoring my relationships with my family and friends. I was ignoring so much because all my energy was focused over here. And that's what happens to us, I think, is we just get so zoomed in and focused on one thing. And then
do you find that most men are that way? I've always felt that men get their self-esteem by what they do, and our wives get self-esteem from us and how we make them feel. I don't know if you've seen that over your counseling days, because I'm the same way, man. My business, when I first started, I'd work all night. I'd go home, put the kids to bed, and come back and either do t-shirts or whatever else I had to do for the business for the next day to make my school grow. So I don't know, do you see that as a pattern or what?
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, us as guys, we're just physical people. Like, we're just physical. We're visual. We're physical. We like to do. We like to complete. We like to achieve. We like to conquer. We like all those things. Where women are more emotional. They get satisfied in different ways. For the most part. I don't want to generalize anything, because there's
right. Yeah, be careful, because
I got to be careful what I say.
Right, we're gonna get left hooked in like in a heartbeat. But it is what it is. There's no getting around that. I've seen it all the time, and you're right. Every one of those things is, that's me for sure. I don't want to talk for every guy, but I'm telling you, for most males, it's completing tasks and being physical is something that is in our DNA. It just is. It is what it is.
And let's look at the way that guys are raised. As guys, as men, we're not encouraged to share our emotions. We're not encouraged to cry at movies or to cry in situations, right? We're taught to push all that stuff down, stand up, be a man, be tough, be all these things, right? So we're taught to push all these things down. Then we get into relationships with women who are emotional, and they're more connected, and they're much more resourceful that way. Then all of a sudden we're supposed to be sharing our feelings, and like, what is that? And that's where the tension starts to come.
That's
All of a sudden, we're supposed to open this stuff up. We have no clue. We have no clue what we're supposed to do.
that's so true. Yeah, I find that to be that is so true, right? And, you know, that happened. That was a big thing for me. Yeah, Jay's on here saying this thing. He does, man. He's a workhorse too.
Yeah.
So I was saying that when I raised I have I have 3 boys and I had an adopted son named Bo when I got him when he was 12. You know, he's a grown man with his own school and family now in Idaho. But you know, raising my boys, you know, I raised them like men. And now when I got divorced, so I raised my children. I wasn't the weekend dad. I was the one that raised them. And then my girl came along and I'm like, oh my goodness.
What do I
It
do?
just was a different animal altogether. You know, I'm like, oh my gosh, we have to talk about all this. Or if I raise my voice wrong, you know, my boys, I'm like, man, go ahead and snap to it and see what happens. Or, you know what I mean? I said, I'll knock the snot right out of you. And just not the same thing for my daughter. We got to talk. We gotta console. I have to figure out the language because she talks in code, and I'm supposed to try and figure out what she wants.
Yeah.
And I still do it today. I was shopping, and she's like, "What are you getting at the store?" And I'm like, "Okay, is that a code for you need me to get you something? Just text me. Hey, Dad, can you pick this up?"
Yeah.
Oh no, never mind. And I'm like, "Oh gosh, here we go."
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I guess that's the 2 things. Well, that's what you do for a living, right? You gotta combat the sexes in the relationships, right?
Yeah, and it's harder and harder, you know. You know, just on that note, with speaking code and stuff. I mean, I've been married for now 40 years. Now we just celebrated 40 years, and my wife still speaks in code. I think it's code. She thinks she's speaking plain English, but it's still code. It's like I have to do the same thing. I got to turn to her, honey. Are you asking me to do something? Like, it's just the way they are. They're just completely different in nature, and I think that's one of the challenges for us guys. And I know it's a challenge for women, because they got to learn male talk, right? They got to
Right.
learn
That's
learn
correct.
that. So it is about, and one of the things that I think is really key for any relationship is learning the language. It doesn't matter if it's in a romantic relationship or a business relationship, even a friendship, right? We need to learn what the other person needs to hear, how we can convey it or communicate it in a way that they get it and they understand. And so sometimes it's not just the way we want to communicate it because we think it's the best way or the right way or the only way. Sometimes we just have to kind of, sneak alongside and say, okay, this would be a better way that they can understand, that they get. But it's a tough thing. And when we get busy, and as guys, we're drivers, most of us, we're just driving forward, we're getting things done, we're completing tasks, we're on target. And sometimes we can forget that, oh, I need to step back a little bit, figure out the best way to communicate this, because sometimes, not sometimes, most times, our partners may not receive things the same way as we feel they need to receive it, right? You and I, we speak a certain language. We expect people to be direct. We expect people to be straightforward with us. But sometimes other people just don't get that language or don't want to receive that language the same way. And so it's really important that we step back and look at that. And that holds across the board, I think.
Well, so you said something really interesting there. So let's take somebody like me, because I'm a pretty direct. I mean, if you've been around me for a minute, you're going to know that I say what I mean. I mean what I say and say what I mean. I don't sugarcoat much.
Sure. Yeah.
And, I can beat up on myself just as much as beat up on somebody else. I don't really have an issue with that. But when you, what do you think about when you're like that? Let's say not just in a romantic relationship. Let's just say even in the workplace. How do you deal with? Yeah, Jay knows. How do you deal with that? I mean, can it come across as overpowering? Because I find myself, even this is me, right? Even with my staff, I mean, I'm pretty direct, and I'm like, I told you to do A, B, and C. You didn't do A, B, and C. Why not? No, you know what I mean?
Right.
And how do you help curve that? What's some lessons on? I don't know. I just, you know what? In my head, I just not like that. And I said, okay, I'm just going to be direct with you. This is exactly how I feel. This bang, bang, bang.
Sure.
And sometimes I'm going to tell you, man, that's like, when you're fighting and you hit that bag that comes back like this and you
Right.
don't duck your head, you get pounded in the face. That happens to me quite often.
Yeah.
That backfires, right?
Sure.
So tell me something about that. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I'll give you an example. My wife in the company that she worked for, she's kind of the supervisor in her area. And they have certain terms that they use of products and services and different things. And she was getting upset with one of the people in her department because they weren't following. They didn't, she asked her to grab something or do something particular. And this girl brought 6 or 7 different things back thinking, okay, is this it? And I said to my wife, I said, you're assuming they understand your language. You're assuming that she understands what you're talking about. Maybe she has no idea what that is. And so sometimes as leaders, we can express things, we can give directions, but that's only assuming that they understand the language that we're using to for that particular task. We're assuming that they understand what needs to be done. When my daughter was young, she was about 5 years old. Her room was a mess. I sent her into her room. I said, clean your room. An hour later, I went back in to check on my daughter. Guess what? She's sitting in the middle of the room and her room looked exactly the same. And suddenly I clicked. I went, cleaning the room means absolutely nothing to a 5-year-old. I needed to instruct her. I needed to show her the systems and where things should go and why it should be like that. And it's the same in leadership. We assume that people know what it means when we say, clean up that department, clean up that table, get this task. We're assuming that they know what that means. Sometimes we haven't taken time to explain what the system is, explain what the procedure is so that they can follow that through. And I think if we could communicate those systems and have those procedures understood, then when we give them a direction to say, do this, do this, do this, then they know exactly what to follow. Or at least there's some protocol for them to discern. Does that make sense?
Because it makes sense. So I hear what you're saying is, I'm a perfect example of this kind of thought process. What you're talking about, why do I have to explain to you if you see a piece of trash on the ground, pick it up? I can't, like in my head, I can't fathom it, right? I can't.
Yeah.
I can't understand. If you're working, if you're in the studio, your number one objective is to make sure that, okay, if the toilet paper ain't done, do it. There should be, in my head, in my thinking, there should be no reason one of my parents are coming and saying, hey, there's no paper towels. I can't comprehend that. Right. And I'm like, is this not the first thing that you guys check? I've told you to check. First thing you got to do is check this. And then I'm a doer. I'm not a task looker. You know what I mean? Mm. I don't like list. I just do.
Right.
But I've come to find out that a lot of people need a list and say, okay, hey, I need to get this done, this done, this done. Yeah. This is what keeps Mr. Cox happy. This is what pisses him off. Right. And so, yeah, I'm weak at that, just so you know. I'm weak at even making a list. It pisses me off when I have to make a list. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Right. Because I just assume, see, Flame is 100% opposite of me. He's one of these anal dudes that have list for lists. You know what I mean? I'm not that way.
Yeah.
I assume that this is your job and I assume that you're going to get it done. And I'm not a micromanager either. If I say this is what I want done, I don't want to hear about how you got it done. I just want to hear that you got it done.
Right.
And so I don't know. I often wonder if I lack leadership on that, or what. I find that a weakness in me. Just so you know, and I don't know if that's typical for highly driven people. Organization. I don't know what's your thought on that? So you have people that have organizational skills and you got visionaries. I mean, is there, and how do you kind of put that glue together? How's that work?
Sure. Well, I think for people that are visionaries, that are just drivers that just say, okay, this is what we should do. Right. You need to have people, or, they need to have people in their lives that do like making lists and do like coming up with the procedures. Because let's face it, those procedures are important. I mean, you and I would just like, okay, let's fly in a plane, right? Let's go to some place. And it's easy for us to just say, I'm going to hop on a plane to go. But we know that the pilot has a checklist. We know the co-pilot has a checklist. Somebody had to make those checklists for us to just say, let's go. And so as leaders, we need to gather people around us. And what we want to do is gather our weakness. We want to gather people that can pull up the slack of our weakness. If you don't like making lists, then have someone in your circle that likes making lists. If you don't like, making procedures, just say, this is what I expect, A, B, and C. And then have someone that can come up and say, okay, I'll make A, B, and C into a list, into, something that's tangible so people get it. The biggest thing I think that why people don't pick up trash or change paper towel rolls is awareness, right? They're not aware of things that are unimportant to them. And so it's just, as leaders, we need to make them, keenly aware of their surroundings, just kind of have them stretch their vision back a little bit so that they begin to see that is an important part and why it's important. The closer we can get things to connect to a person, the more aware that they'll be about it, right? Like if we heard on the news that there was a plane crash overseas someplace, we would be upset. But if there was a report on the news that there was a plane crash in our backyard, we'd be devastated, right? Because the proximity is closer to us. And it's the same with awareness. It's the same as getting people to pick up trash and to pick up things. It's not painfully aware. They're not aware of it. It's not painful to them. It's just drawing it in closer. But as leaders, it's having the people that can pull up rise up in those areas that we don't like to do. I'm the same way. There's things that I don't like to do, but I know I have to do. I don't like looking after paperwork, so I got an accountant, right? That I just, because they love making lists and making sure everything fits. And so I think as leaders, that's one of the key things that we need to do.
Yes, I think that's really good. That's really good advice. At least it is for me. I can tell you that because I happen to know where my weaknesses are. I try and work on them quite often, and but then again, I fail on a regular basis.
We all do, don't we?
It is what it is, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Every day I'm like, you freaking idiot. I talk to myself all the time. I'm like, I just did it, man. I just did it at a function I just had, man. I just, I couldn't take the, I was at I had my own event, like what we were at.
Okay.
Probably about the same amount of people, right? And I don't know. When I was there, Jim, I don't know, when all the speakers were speaking, I don't know if you saw this, but I was there on a Saturday and I watched every speaker. And, the ones in the beginning, everything's there. Everybody's got excited. And then lunch comes. And then about half of them never show back up after lunch.
Right.
And then the speakers are done and they leave. Right. And by the time the last speaker was on, there was 4 of us in the room.
Yeah.
And I went and took my pen and paper and I sat in the front row and I said, I'm going to listen to what this man has to say or this woman has to say and be intent on that. And people lose so much interest when it's not interested to them.
That's right.
And that's another one of those things. I'm like, why do I have to tell you to have some courtesy and have some direction and let's elevate these guys because that's what I want them to do when I'm up on the stage.
Sure.
Yeah. It's the same as an instructor, and I love teaching huge classes, but I'll be just as excited to teach you and I one-on-one. I'll be fired up. Trust me. When I'm doing one-on-one lessons.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I don't know if that's just a human nature thing or if this is just me. But I don't know, Jim, as I get older, I have a lot less tolerating some bullshit.
Sure.
I just do. I just don't. I'm like, don't even talk to me, man. Just shut up, man. Just have some ownership, right? Just have some ownership. Say what you did is sucks, and I can move on from that. When you make excuses, I just kind of shut down.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I find I often wonder why everybody thinks there's grumpy old man. It's not they're grumpy. They're just done. You know what I mean? It's just like, I'm done with your BS. Shut up.
Sure.
And I don't know how you do that. How do you talk to a group in a leadership? Because you have a great demeanor, just so you know. You've got this I don't know. This is Tim, man. This guy. Since you got older, since I've known you, true. I think that I don't know how you talk to a group when and then to help them address these things. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I really feel like you have a great demeanor. You have this this kind of an easygoing tone. Mine is not that way once I'm heated. When I'm heated,
Sure.
there is no turning the fire down unless I can crash some bricks.
Is
I
that why
can
you started
push.
breaking bricks?
Oh man, if I can push some iron or I can get on the mat and get physical, I cannot release that steam. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
I don't know what your thought is on that.
Yeah. I mean, we're all gifted, to do different things. We're all wired differently. We're all gifted differently. And I think that's why it's important, relationships, because we need each other, right? There's an area that we can, come alongside and support and encourage in one another across the board. And I think one of the biggest frustrations is common sense used to be common sense. Common sense ain't common sense anymore, right? There just seem to be I don't know if those classes just aren't taught in school anymore. I don't know if there's no, they don't teach those degrees in college or university, but there's just no common sense in things. And I think that's what gets frustrating for us as we get older, is that the common sense isn't really instilled in the generation, that's below us, or a couple of generations. And I think part of it is, as we get older, we need to take the responsibility and say, okay, some of the common sense that I knew growing up was instilled in me by someone that was older. And I think part of us need to remember that and be willing to instill that into others. Common sense just isn't something that's inherited. It's something that we learn. And because now all of a sudden we've got a generation, for a couple generations now, that have learned completely different. They don't learn the way you and I learned, going out and getting physical and trial and error and tripping and getting ourselves back up again. A lot of them are just not learning. They're indoors, they're on computers. There's their complete different isolation from growing and developing and maturing in certain things. And they rely now more than ever on quality leaders to instill common sense. Because again, it goes back to that thing of awareness. They're just not aware. A lot of people coming up today are just not aware of anything more than the close circle that they live in.
That's such good advice right there. Because I see this on a daily here. I'm always selfish about this because I flash back to what I deal with. But I would say even one of my guys, right? He, when he has a pile of clothes or whatever, it doesn't bother him. He doesn't see it as a mess. And I'm like, I'm going to throw this stuff in the alley if you don't clean it up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I guess that's just people's perceptions, I guess, are different. And I have a hard time dealing with it, Jim. I don't know. Because to me, common sense is, if I'm walking down this thing and you got all this stuff thrown here, this is going to piss me off. So I would advise you not to do it. But what do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, I think, again, I use this illustration. If we want to take on a sport, let's say hockey, something maybe you've never done before. We want to take up hockey. We wouldn't just jump in and just start playing the game. We would learn a little bit about the game. And if we knew what the rules were, then we could play along in the game and we could navigate it pretty well. But if they kept changing the rules and adding rules and not telling us the rules, it would get pretty frustrating. And I think the same goes in families, in businesses, in relationships, is we don't know the rules. We don't know how to play. And it's defining those. And again, it goes to leadership. So leadership in the home is the parents. The parental role is to lay out the rules and to create that structure so it's a safe environment for everybody. And then there needs to be consequences and rewards for following those rules. And so part of it is we don't introduce the rules. We don't explain them. Take a parent with a teenage daughter or son, all of a sudden they hit adolescence, the hormones go crazy. We've all been through that. Everything goes ballistic. But if we don't take time beforehand and explain the rules and help them to navigate that, then they have no understanding, no way of knowing how to get through it. And so then they just kind of resort to what they think is best, or, then they can become defiant. Well, that rule was never introduced, or you never told me this before. it's really laying it out and just saying, okay, this is what you can expect. This is what I expect, and this is why we should do it this way. And part of it is, I think, too, is learning them, teaching them the importance of completing tasks, right? Just completing things, because then you can move on. You know, when you've got a clean environment, a clean room, then it sets you up for success, because now you're prepared to move on and do something else. When you're going out to do something, going to an interview, you're not wrestling around on your floor trying to find a clean shirt or clean underwear. You know where everything is. And so it's teaching them the importance of having those boundaries, setting those systems up so that they're setting themselves up for success. That's the whole reason why we tell them to clean a room, right? That's why I'd sent my daughter, in her bedroom when she was 5 years old, and said, clean your room. What I was trying to say, look, if you keep an orderly room, it's safe, it's a good environment, you know where everything is. And it's just, it's teaching yourself some self-respect and some self-esteem. But I didn't convey that. I just said, go and clean it. And we do that as people get older. We say, just do your laundry. Why? Why is that so important?
I laugh because it's totally me. I'd be like, what part of clean your room did you not understand? That would be me. That would be like to my boys. I'm like, what part of me telling you to do this did you not get?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And of course, then it starts to, that kind of response gets a next response, until all of a sudden this little thing is now gone from cleaning your room to talking to me in a disrespectful tone and me wanting to knock his teeth out of his mouth.
Sure.
As my oldest son, right? Not my oldest son, my middle son, right? So
yeah,
I feel that all the time, and I'm just like, oh man.
It comes back to the importance of why, right? Take when we learn how to drive, for example, right? We were told to look over our shoulders when we changed lanes, right? Why? Well, because there might be a car in your blind spot. Why? We need to explain that. And now it's natural for us, right? To do that. We can look over our shoulders without swerving into all the lanes, right? But we need to have that explained to us as to why we need to do that. And so sometimes as we get older, everything that comes so automatically and instantly for us, we don't even think about the whys. We just say do, rather than just saying, okay, there's a younger mind coming up, a younger person in my company, a younger person in my family that doesn't understand the whys. And it's explaining the whys and then following through with some systems so that they can follow.
I think that was a really good one. Explaining the why.
I think I'm going to get the recording of this myself and keep it. This is good.
Explaining the why. That's good, because Jose put out there too the importance of completing tasks. I think, man, that just goes hand in hand, right? But explain why it's important. I don't do that at all, just so you know.
Yeah.
I don't even do that with my employees. I don't sit there, I'm just, I'll find myself upset in a staff meeting, and instead of saying, hey, this is why this is important, because if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen from my experience.
Yeah.
I very rarely do that. I can't say I don't do it all the time, but I very rarely do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, this is good. I find out how much I suck when I do this today.
Hey, we all do. I mean, I'm still learning and growing and refining things, but it's learning how to become, good leaders rather than just a good manager, right? We don't want to just manage things, but if we set up systems, if we set up people for success, then we become good leaders. That's the definition of a leader, I think. It's just setting people up for success. And then we have to step back at leaders and say, okay, what's the best way that I can set them up for success? What's going to assure them or give them the best opportunity to be set up for success? And then, like we talked about earlier, you don't like making lists. I don't really care for it either. So let's find somebody that likes making lists. Let's hire somebody that's really good at doing that, so that we can get those systems in place. Because our entire businesses, our entire lives are built on systems. And once we got those systems, then we can begin to manage those, or have someone manage them for us, right? Now we don't have to be a taskmaster all the time, because things are there, things are clear.
So what do you do, Jim, when you're looking at trying to figure out what is somebody's strength? Where are you at? Is this from your experience? You feel like this is where somebody's strengths are. This is where you're compatible with this, or this is what you need to work on. How do you go about finding people's strengths?
Hmm. That's a good question. I've never really thought about that. One of the best ways to find a person's strength is to watch how they serve and interact with other people. Right, you begin to find the strengths, because I think there's mental strengths, right? What's our ability to accomplish things? There's community strengths. How well can I serve? How well can I look after others? There's lots of different areas that we can measure strength with. So I think it's sitting back and looking at people and just watching how they interact, how they treat others, how they respond in certain things. And when I was as a youth pastor, I would tell kids just to get out and just serve, find a place to serve and just serve. And then through that, they would find the things that they were good at. They would find the things that they liked, the things that they enjoyed, that they didn't enjoy. And then you would start a list, and start working on that list from the top and the bottom. I've got the things that I really like to do. I got the things that I hate to do. And then we begin to whittle it down. And then we find the thing that we're passionate about. We find the things that we're really good at.
Mm. Do you have you used any kind of litmus tests or any kind of tests like that out there that points people in their strengths and weaknesses?
No, I haven't done. I did one, and I can't even recall what the name of it was. It was a friend of mine that I knew, and he created one. He called it Dancing with Porcupines, and he had four different categories, and in that you could find your personality, you could find your strengths and weaknesses, and I seem to recall it was dogs. It was like a Doberman Pinscher or a Labrador Retriever, an Irish Setter, and I forget what the other one was, but there was four dogs, and we can see our personality traits in them. With Dobermans, of course, they're very direct, they're very strong, they're very assertive. Labradors are very faithful, very responsible, and love people. Irish Setters are just kind of a little bit ditzy, they're a little bit bouncy, they're a little bit all over the place. So we can see just characteristics in people. But oftentimes you can pick that out just the way they interact with one another.
That's interesting. I know that myself. I know what my strengths are and my weaknesses are. Do you find that people know what they are and don't want to admit what they are, or they try and mask them, or they don't have ownership in what their weaknesses are?
Yeah.
Do you find that most people know what their strengths are, or do you find that they don't know what their strengths are? They don't really know what to do.
I
What
think
do you run across?
Yeah, I think both can be inhibited by self-esteem, right? Some
Mm.
people can be really strong, speakers, communicators, leaders, but they don't have the self-confidence, they don't have the self-esteem to go with it. Others can be really um, you know poor at something, and the same thing, they rather than trying to improve, they say, oh, I'm just not good enough, never be able to do this, right? So we can make excuses rather than trying to find reasons or ways that we can continue to grow. So I think one of the key things is just our self-confidence. It's just that the confidence that we have in ourselves can affect on both ways. And I think if when we got strengths, we need to work on those strengths, but at the same time I think we need to work on our weaknesses as well. Or again, like I said, have people, if you're in a position where you can hire somebody to take those. I mean, so if you're in a company and you're weak in a couple of areas, then you need to get someone on staff that can fill that and take care of that. But a lot of it comes down to self-confidence.
I think right, and I know that weaknesses in me, so I do have strategic people around me that uh, that fulfill certain things for me, right? So I know this, as hardcore as I am, I'm super soft in the heart, man. So if somebody comes and gives me a hard luck story, even though I know it's probably not the what it should be, I'll alter. Okay, don't worry about paying then. Don't worry about it. Or I allow myself to get used all the time. I mean, I never charge for private lessons and stuff like that. I don't know why I don't do it. It's just okay, you want me to teach, and I'll teach it, and then and that's what happens. It is what it is. But so I put somebody else in charge when it comes to this money thing that is a little more cutthroat, and they're not emotionally invested like I am in students.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that works out well. And this is great too, because I want to make sure my oldest son comes back and listens to this, because he's the one that's kind of navigating to kind of try and fill my shoes and what it is that I do. And he's a complete opposite of me. He's not a this super, over the top type A. He's type A, but he's not like me.
Right.
He's just not as intense. He's laid back, man. He's kind of, he's the Hawaii version of me, right?
Okay.
Hey, it's all good. It's all good, Dad. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I got it. Son, what are you doing today? Oh, I'm chilling, Dad. That's it. Just chilling.
Yeah.
And he had some hard conversations with me, Jim. Believe it or not, when my son a few years ago, this was really hard, man. You talk about some hard hitting, and I'm like, bro, where you been? You got to get down here. And he goes, hey, listen, Dad, I've watched you my whole life work. You've never had a vacation. We didn't do family vacations, which I knew because we had a divorce, so we didn't have that.
Mm.
And I saw how you didn't want to be at home. I'm going to make sure I have time for vacations for myself and my wife, and I'm going to make sure I spend some time with my wife. I mean, it was like a 1-2 punch, right? In me, to be honest with you, the business probably became the wife. You know what I mean? Because once I got divorced, I'm like, you know what? I'm all in then. Let's get down. Let's get down to business, and rocking and rolling. And so that was quite a conversation. My 20-something-year-old saying, it was like a real reflection of, wow, that's what he watched, right? It's like the Cats in the Cradle song,
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And it's so common, Mark, that we can marry our jobs. Right. I was married to my business. I was married to ministry. And we can lose ourselves because we love the fulfillment that it brings to us. We love the validation that it brings to us as men. But the problem is when someone is coming alongside that we're trying to glean into leadership, we expect them to have that same marriage. We expect them to have that same, consideration for the relationship. And that's when we need to really step back and analyze it and just say, what are good, strong boundaries? Because I think one of the best things we can teach leaders as they're growing up and our sons as they're growing up is boundaries. Because you're absolutely right. When I was driven by work and I was driven by being successful, I was driven by, all the homes and all the projects and all the things that we were building and doing. And that can consume us. I always explain it to men. It's kind of like driving your car, right? You got 4 tires on your car. You got 4 wheels on your car. And if you spend, all of your energy in work, it's like all of a sudden that front tire is just inflated to like the size of a tractor tire. Can you imagine what the drive would be like if all of a sudden, you've got, instead of 4 balanced tires, you've got one huge one, right? It's going to pull us. It's going to make the journey really rough. It's going to, always lead to that side. It's going to pull us into that. We need to have balance. It doesn't mean that we're going to divide our time equally among every area in our life, but we need to have some good boundaries around that. And we can't expect other people coming up to have the same ownership. I tell guys in leadership all the time that have small companies growing up, I always say to them, don't expect to hire an employee that cares for your company exactly like you do. You'll never find one. Because we have a vested interest in it. We have ownership in it. There's a different, set of standards and ownership that we have in that business. And so at best, I can hire an employee. At best, I would say I would get 65, maybe 75% of that same care, that same work accomplishments and so on. I would get maybe 65, 75%, regardless of how well I paid them. I wouldn't get 100% out of them. And so as leaders, we know that we're going to care for this because it's our baby, right? It's like you say, it's our marriage, but we need to find that balance in there. And the best thing we can do, teaching that generation coming up behind us, is to put boundaries around us. Because, both of us would probably agree that putting, 80, 90 hours a week into a business, putting, whatever number of hours into something else and not building relationships, not investing in family, probably isn't the best use of our time. It probably wasn't the best way to approach things. But it's easy for us to get consumed in doing that.
That is super impactful, super true. Such a reflection on myself. And being where I'm at in age now too, I look back on, well, first of all, I can't believe how quickly it came up on us,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
And because I'm just in the driver's seat, I'm just going
Yeah.
and I'm going, and I'm still doing that today because for somebody like us, well, for me anyway, I shouldn't say us, but me, this, I own the property that I have my school in, and that was a gift from God, to be honest with you.
Wow.
How I got that, that's a story for you and I another time on how I achieved to own the building that I'm in, and it's just a gift from God, and I know it is because I let churches start here and everything else. Believe it or not, my
Wow.
church started in my karate studio.
Wow.
And then it's got this huge center now that I'm the head of security for it, and it's got this beautiful facility that
Wow.
is taking care of homeless people by the thousands, right?
Wow. I love it.
And that all started in church, and so I know I was blessed on how to get this, but on the same token, I didn't have a coach, Jim, on how to manage money and put money to work for you, right? I was just I was frivolous. Then a divorce hits, right? And then you have 4 kids you got to take care of on your own anyway, and then all that goes with it. And I didn't have a coach. I didn't have a financial coach, and I really feel that was a mistake. And so I don't have this. I got my Social Security, and Social Security tells me, you get all this stuff, right? You get burial stuff when you're our age. This is how the Neptune Society reaches out to us, AARP, and the next is your Social Security. If you take it at 62, you can get $1,200 a month. I'm like, $1,200 a month? What the heck are you talking
that's
about?
groceries.
Right? I'm like, what? You can't even get eggs now for $1,200. So I was like just taken back, and I said, hey, man, I'm going to have to change something here. And so I'm still driving. I'm still driving to make sure the legacy stays where it needs, and I have some kind of a better future for my kids than what I had, because it was just me, man. It was just me building this thing, and that's this was such good. All this stuff today was so good. You can almost have a whole podcast on explaining the why and the importance of completing tasks. You really could.
Sure. Yeah.
Because those two things today, I was like, I know it's important to complete the task. But maybe somebody else doesn't know why that's important.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that was really good. Well, let's talk about what's your latest book that you have. What's your latest book? You said you have 5 books out. So what's the latest one that you did?
So the latest one, well, I'm halfway through writing my next one. And the title on it is I Do, But Now What? And so it's on relationships, of course, but just so many couples getting married have no plan. They have no clue. 90% of couples don't even know what they're going to do with their finances after they get married. They don't know if they're going to have a joint bank account, separate bank accounts, just contribute it. They have not even talked about that kind of stuff. So I've laid out an entire book where I'm starting to talk about that. And so that's my latest project. Well, actually, I've got 2 in the works. I thought this book would be 1, but it's actually 2 books. So it's the I Do Now What, but then I have another one called The Necessity of Effort, and it's for entrepreneurs and business owners, and just the necessity of the effort that we need to put into our relationships after we commit to them, after we say, I'm in, whether it's a business deal, a romantic relationship, whatever it is, it's the necessity effort that needs to follow up. So there's actually 2 projects. One's going to be out this summer, and the next one will be out the end of this year.
So you're working on books now. That's what you're. So do you write is that what you spend time sometimes doing? Is that kind of allocated in your day?
Is that
how you do it?
Yeah, I just locked down for 3 days, and that's why I had that post there yesterday. Being out in the snow, I busted out of my office just to go for a walk to get out. But I locked myself in Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I was just writing and re-going through things. And so yeah, I'm about 50% done. And so from now until the end of April, I'll book an hour a day to write and continue on the manuscript to get it done and completed by the spring.
Yeah, writing the book was something for me. Well, first of all, I never thought I would do it, being somebody that graduated high school by taking a GED.
Yeah.
And then I did some college, and I just didn't like college. Just wasn't my thing. isn't that weird though? But all my kids have college degrees.
Yeah.
And their dad doesn't, but all my kids do. But I told them, I said, hey, listen, college is something that you need to be purposeful with. And I said, where I lacked in business, where, experience and had to take over, and what it is was, there's a couple things. I think that having an accounting background, understanding what numbers do is one thing, and how to write, right? How to formulate, business letters and stuff like that, I think is an important task. So your finances and your writing ability. And I think that knowing how to speak, a speech class, I said in today's college, that could suck, right? Because, if the topic is like way off what you have to do and you got to do it, it's not helping you at all.
Right.
But I told them, I said, those are the main things I think. And then if you're going to be a doctor, then great for school. If my kids, if they want to do trade school, if that's what they wanted to do, then I had no problem with that either. But, I said, you still have to formulate these things so that whether you're working for somebody or you're an entrepreneur, that you have an understanding of how to ask for raises, how the money works.
That's right.
And a personal finance class, personal finance class, at least understand what is a CD, what is all this stuff, because that's what I told him to be purposeful with. And Mike had a great time. Mike took some of his GED, my oldest boy that does this, and then he has a degree in recreational management, which means he went rock climbing, and I said, what are you doing this semester? He goes, oh, it's pretty good, it's pretty awesome, Dad. I'm doing rock climbing and we're doing wakeboarding this year. And I'm like, oh, you've got a rough college degree, bro. So, but he had a blast doing his college. He took the GEDs. He took the ones that I said I think is important, and then that's what he did. And so, I thought that, I never thought I'd write a book. It was now I'm getting feedback on it. You know what I mean? That's the next thing. I said, how did it come across? People that know me are going to read it and say, oh, I've heard these stories of Mr. Cox. It's very reminiscent, and they're going to have memories of me and stuff like that. And then people that don't really know me too well, I wanted to make sure that, hey, does the story resonate with you? And that this guy that didn't graduate high school really to say anything, but can write a book and have a life full of things out of a martial arts school.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, I'm glad you wrote the book, and I agree with you. I think everybody should, write the book. Just the discipline of, structuring our thoughts, like you say, just being able to articulate your thoughts and get them down, because our stories aren't too far off. I mean, I quit school in grade 9. Grade 9 is my last completed year of school, and in grade 9, I had about a grade 5 reading level. I'm dyslexic. I had a speech impediment when I was younger. I absolutely detested school. Don't even get me started on English classes. But then things shifted around. I tried to get my high school diploma. I got bored with it, never completed it. I thought, well, I'll just go to college. That'd be the next step. So I went to college. I took a college course. Halfway through, I got bored with it. My very first course that I ever completed was a university first year psychology course. And the first book I ever recall reading from cover to cover was a 357-page psychology textbook. And that's what started me on the path of learning. There's just something about completing something like that, like a course or a class, or getting your grade 12, writing a book and complete. There's just something about completing that, because once that's complete, then we're set to go to that next level. Because that book for you, that's just going to take you to the next level. I know the next 2 books that I'm taking out are just going to unfold even more for me. But it's just completing those things and moving on, and the great disciplines in it, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that, because that's where I'm at now. Plus, I'm pushing people I know personally that need to write a book.
Yeah,
I'm pushing them now. One we just had out. He was our keynote speaker at our event, and he's a three amputee from. He's a combat ranger that was blown up, and the story of his speech that he did even was like. You look back at your life and go, what am I complaining about, man?
Yeah,
you really. Shut up. And, and he's just he's a great speaker, and he's got a story to tell.
Wow.
And he's the one that I think I'm kind of trying to take under my wing and take him to that next level.
Yeah, that's great.
And so I think that, that's what it is. And as far as where my next thing is, I want to have I don't know, is any of your books you wrote kind of like, here's some steps in a relationship, try A, B, C, D. I mean, that type of a book. Have you done something to that effect?
Well, the first book I wrote was your Relationship Rescue Handbook, and in it I've got 11 F words that I talk about, and they're principles that I taught high school students, college age students when I was a youth pastor, and it was just, what are things that you need to understand? You need to understand what you value in these things before you get into a relationship. Like if you understand what you value around faith and around your finances, around your family, what are your family values? What are your, values around your friends, your future values, all these different things. And I go through a list of 11 of them. And the real heart for the book was to help prepare people going into relationships. I met with a couple once, we were talking about their upcoming wedding. And I was just sharing some of the principles, just asking about, their financial goals and what their plans are when they get married and so on. We started talking about all these different things. And the bride-to-be, she started crying. And I leaned forward and I said, "What is the matter?" She says, "I'm 25 years old and nobody's ever told me that I should consider these things in a relationship." And that's when I wrote my first book. And so that's what that book is for, is to help people keep, I always say that the best time to have the best relationship that ever is before we begin them. The next best time is now, because we can understand, if we know what our values are, when we get into a relationship, we won't lose our identity. When we know what we stand for, we're going to start gathering people in a relationship that share those same values. But when we get into a relationship with people just because they're cute or they're nice and they make us feel good, that may not be the basis of a good relationship. So understanding what we value, what we feel in our heart, what we truly believe, not just because it's somebody else's, but it's ours. That to me is the foundation for a good relationship. And so that's what I taught in this first book, was start looking at these different things. And they're elements that we can continue to do even as we're going through a relationship. We can continue to have the conversations. All right, honey, where are we with our finances? Are our goals still on track? Have they changed? Because things do change over time. When we're young, it's just the two of us. When we get married, it's just the two of us. Then we have children. Now we got a family. And then the kids grow, they leave, and then things continue to change, And so my wife and I have just kind of looked at that journey, and we've adjusted and done different things as we've gone along. So that's the heart of that first book.
That's interesting. I think I'm gonna pick that up today. I think I'm gonna go on Amazon. Yeah, that's on Amazon. Yeah,
it's on Amazon. Yep. But and you can also go onto my website, and I'd be happy to sign a copy.
Oh yeah. See, I'd rather do that anyway. I tell everybody, if authors have a website, to go there anyway, because first of all, you can get an autographed copy, and the author can make the money on the book, not Amazon. So I agree with that 100%. So,
and then you got the connection or relationship, which is even better.
Yeah.
I think, and it's it's a lot of fun.
Cut out. I don't know what happened. I hit some button hidden, and I was out. I was like, "What the heck did I just do?"
I was going to say, I'm sitting here looking at myself, going, "What am I doing now?"
My thing was, I was moving over here to write down your website, and then I hit the button wrong. Is it your name or what? What's the website?
Yeah, it's my name, but there's a really easy one that people can go to. It's just CoachJim360.com. And at that website, you can get all my social media connections. You can connect on my website. You can get my personal information to connect with me on WhatsApp, text me, email me, anything. You can get everything right there on that spot.
Okay, I'm going to put that on there. There we go. That does make it easier. So that's good. Well, that's good, Jim. I this was a really this is good for me today, man. I really enjoyed and we've had quite a bit of people here. Coach Marvin was on today at some point.
Oh, wonderful.
Michael Caro, that guy's an awesome guy too. He's a firefighter and a wrestler.
Oh, great.
Yeah, that's been good. Yeah, this hour went by quick. I tell people quite often, I said my podcast, sometimes I selfish in it because I'm always trying to ask questions about what has affected me, but I'm pretty much, if it's affected me, it's affected a lot more than just me.
You're right. Because we all share, we're all in the same boat, especially as guys. We're all in the same boat. We're sharing the same stuff. at one level or another. So I agree. This has just been a great conversation. I've enjoyed this time with you. Just when I met you the very first time there, just a few weeks back, I just enjoyed getting to know you, that little bit just in our personal interaction together. So I was really excited about getting on here today.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I know sometimes my persona is this freaking gorilla that likes to smash things, but
yeah. Hey,
there's another side of me.
I was the assistant head game warden when I was younger at a safari park. So I'm used to working with all kinds of gorillas and tigers. I can tell you some stories about that. I had a tiger one time. I was moving it from one cage to another. It was tranquilized. It started waking up. I'll tell you that one another time.
That'd be good. All right, then. Well, if you do me a favor, if you can just stick around for a second once I end live, I'll speak to you off camera just for a second. But I wanted to say thanks for this hour, man. I could have sit and done this for a minute here, so. But I'll end the broadcast. We'll make sure all your stuff is out there. This will also be on audio, so I'll send the audio portion of it too. Awesome. You'll be on my website, and then you'll also, and that's anybody can go to YouTube also to watch what we talked about today, and then there'll be the audio portion of it, and I'll send it to you. There'll be a blank for about 3 or 4 seconds there where I hit the button, but in audio, I'll go back and see if I can edit that part out. So, all right, I appreciate it, Jim. Just hang tight for just a second.
All right.